Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Danielle, and this is not a full episode, but it's actually just a promo or introduction to my podcast for my new business. So, my new business is called Fresh Start Life Coaching. Disclaimer is I'm not on here trying to get followers or fans or try to promote my business or sell you anything. For me, I just want to create this safe space to just have honest and yet difficult and sometimes taboo conversations that maybe a lot of people don't always talk about, but that I feel like they're important to me, and kind of create a safe space where we can talk about these topics that I wish that someone had kind of created this space for me to talk about, if that makes sense. So I am a life coach, and my focus or my areas or people that I really feel kind of passionate to work with are those that have struggled due to miscarriages, infertility, and choice moms or single moms by choice. And you might be thinking, okay, well, there's other podcasts on those topics. There's other people that talk about infertility, there's other people that talk about miscarriage, and I've seen some podcasts, a few that talk about those that are single moms by choice. But for me, the difference is that I am African American, and a lot of times when I see the podcast, there's nothing against anyone, nothing against race or anything like that, but a lot of the podcasts I see are people that are outside the United States. I'm in the United States, and that don't look like me. And so I feel like a lot of times we tackle these topics, but it's, for me, that aspect is just like getting it from someone that's a person of color and someone that is a minority in a way, and where you kind of talk about it in a way that is just different. It's conversations that we don't have, like especially in the African American community. Growing up, I never heard sermons about infertility, never heard sermons about miscarriage, and to be honest, many of the moms that I met weren't single parents by choice. They were single parents by just happenstance, by what happened in their life. And so no one ever talked about, not being able to have children. It was always, I kind of think back to my family and kind of growing up, having that aunt that was always there, that, loved on us and was always supportive and that loved kids, but that was never able to have kids. And I know sometimes that's considered a spinster, and I don't really care for that term because I feel like it always has that negative connotation, or people said, oh, even for me, they're like, oh, Danielle, you're just going to be a cat lady. And it's always kind of been this running joke. But for me, sometimes those terms can be hurtful. It's one thing to love cats. There's nothing wrong with that. But to, kind of penalize someone or look down on them because they're not able to have kids, I just feel like that's something that I've seen kind of growing up and kind of throughout the generations. But honestly, as I struggled with infertility, I felt alone. As I stated, no one talked about it in church. It wasn't a topic that really got any focus. You maybe get a sermon about Hannah and different things in the Bible and how she overcame her infertility, but no one really talked about it. There was no support groups. There was nothing. And then when I was struggling with infertility, when I got married around 25, almost 26, I had no one to turn to. There was nothing. There's nowhere to go. I felt like no safe space, no one to talk to about it. And then when I had my miscarriages, I had one about 6 years ago, and then one less than a year ago. Once again, there was no one really to talk to about it. And I remember when I had my first miscarriage, a lot of women in church came up to me and they said, oh, I've had a miscarriage. But it's just like, it was just kind of like this secret, and no one ever talked about it, as I stated. And then it was just like I realized how many women had suffered in silence and had not really talked about it. They didn't have a space to talk about it, so something they kind of took with them, and they kind of opened up when they heard that someone else had a miscarriage, because my miscarriage was really public. I had that loss at almost about 5 months, so everyone knew. The second time around, I didn't tell a lot of people, so thankfully a lot of people didn't know, but I just felt like I had to suffer in silence. It was something I had to keep hitting for a variety of reasons, which I'll talk about on one of the episodes. And then also deciding to be a single mom by choice, that's a whole nother thing. I felt like that's taboo. And honestly, in the African American community, I don't know any women that have chosen to kind of grow their family on their own. Maybe a woman or two maybe that's chosen to grow their family through adoption, but no one's ever talked about using a donor, and kind of that process. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to create those conversations and have those conversations, and plan to also bring on guests that have been where I've been, or kind of are where I want to go in that sense, because, for me, these topics are personal. I've gone through the infertility, so going through it now, have still kind of processing everything due to my 2 miscarriages. And then now I'm also in the process of choosing a donor because I want to have another child. Thankfully, I was able to go on to have a daughter. My daughter right now is almost 6 years old. But I want her to have a sibling, and I find myself single and almost 40 and weighing my options. And I'm seeing that more often than I did before, where, a lot of women are finding themselves in their 30s and their 40s and almost 50s and deciding, what do I want to do next? They're not getting married. There are no prospects on the horizon, and they're like, okay, egg freezing is expensive. But then thinking, okay, I want to adopt. I want to be a foster parent. I want to find a donor and have a child that way. But where do you start? Especially when no one talks about it, especially when kind of people frown on it. And even in my case, being a Christian and those kind of options sometimes being looked down upon, and you don't really have any support. So what do you do? So I'm here, as I stated, not to sell my services or push my beliefs on you, but as a life coach to support you, to help you set goals, to motivate you to reach those goals when it comes to infertility, miscarriage, and possibly starting a family on your own, to hold you accountable, if you like, regarding meeting those goals, and to discuss the grief, to discuss coping tools, to help you to find ways to walk in your healing and put those pieces back together after a loss, and to help you address triggers and so much more, realizing that, realistically, those numbers might be higher or even lower than expected, but I didn't know until after this happened to me that at least 1 in 4 pregnancies will end in miscarriages, and at least 1 in 5 women that are between the ages of 15 to 49 years old struggle due to infertility. And I didn't even know the numbers are that high, and they're probably even higher, So just thinking about it, I'm like, this is a real topic. This is something that's real going on. To me, it's a public health crisis, but a lot of people don't see it that way. So I want to come and walk alongside you to support you in this. Disclaimer, once again, this is not counseling. So a lot of people kind of mix up counseling and life coaching. With counseling, the focus is a lot of times the past. Sometimes you might want to get a diagnosis. You want to deal with complex trauma and PTSD. For me, we might talk a little bit about trauma if we do have a conversation, say one-on-one, but my focus is the future and helping you walk into the future, plan for the future, and walk in that healing so you can have a better quality of life, so you can be a better version of yourself. So I look forward to having these conversations with you. Thank you for joining me today. I know I said this was not a full episode. It kind of went a little bit longer than I expected, but I do look forward to just having these tough conversations and to be honest and to be open and be vulnerable. So I look forward to talking to you soon, and have a good day. Bye.